What is going on, everybody? Thank you all so much for tuning into this live stream segment of Mika Says Sukasa. Of course, as always, I'm your humble host, Niko House. Today, I have with me two very special guests returning to the show, Terry Baines. And so if Terry is here, you know you're going to get a good history lesson unlike those you have heard before. And we have a very special guest coming on the show for the first time, Sam Richards. Now, Sam is an activist. He is currently in Minnesota. He's taking parts in the events of Occupy and in other areas. And he has become privy to some interesting knowledge regarding the governor of Minnesota and how he has been basically working with the U.S. government. Sam, can you go ahead and let us know what you've seen going on down there on the ground?
Yeah, absolutely. I was always interested in kind of how the government's been surveilling protests. My little upstart news organization a few years back caught what could have been the police using a stingray at a Black Lives Matter protest. We published that data, and I'd be happy to talk about that later too, because that obviously keys into the Fusion Center stuff. But what you're referring to with the governor was a press conference not all that long ago when the uprisings in Minneapolis started, in which he just explicitly blurted out that the NSA was helping the Minnesota National Guard as well as law enforcement kind of police and patrol the protests. And he gave a really long-winded answer about how since the Guard was kind of laundering the intelligence, that it's constitutional because the National Guard is comprised of citizen soldiers. And I can post the link and share it with you guys later, that what he talked for like 2 minutes, and it was a really winding, convoluted answer. But he, like I said, he just explicitly blurted out that the NSA was helping law enforcement with the protests here. And
that's a super specific organization. I mean, I feel like he couldn't have misspoken. I don't know how you walk that back. I mean, there's a lot of, the alphabet agencies, there's a lot of them. But if you are brought to say one very specific one, it's probably because you've been reading that reading that name over and over and over and over again.
Exactly. And even, I'm glad you brought up the whole it's hard to misspeak the NSA thing, because when I was listening to the report that came out afterwards, it really did feel like he hardballed us. Like, watch out, the NSA's looking into what you're doing. Don't go loot. Don't organize on Facebook. And then when someone asks, he goes, oh, it wasn't the NSA. Don't worry about it. So
now I'm going to assume it was the NSA.
Yeah. And even the NSA and the CIA, they'll give anonymous tips all the time. So it's like consider the source. Is there really a difference between the NSA and the National Guard as far as intelligence collecting on Americans at this point? I would say there's probably rules about the limits of it, but as a whole, it's the same mechanism, I think.
Yeah, and I would even say, so what this reveals to me is two things. One, that the government, if anybody's been wondering how the government has been able to preempt a lot of the protests, because it hasn't only happened in Minnesota. We've seen local governments around the country be able to get police to locations when most of the organizing was done behind the scenes on maybe Signal or Slack or something like that, and the police are there in advance. And to me, that lets me know that they've been probably working with them, like you just said, basically since the beginning of the protest. And the fact that basically he had a trigger ready for this exact situation lets me know that it's something that has happened over and over and over again. And they've had a little practice at it. Now, this practice has been known as what's called a fusion center. And Terry has some experience with fusion centers. So, Terry, let us know a little bit about what you've dealt with regarding the issue of the local governments collaborating with the intelligence community to stomp out major organizing efforts.
Well, how about let's take the Wayback Machine and we'll go back to 2014 and the Ferguson uprising. And and I dropped the phone just thinking about how much fun we all had during that. In 2014, basically what people had to get a handle on from an old Occupy guy like me was you're not just dealing with the crooked cops in a 20,000 population Ferguson. You're dealing with the whole United States government military industrial complex. And the mechanism that's done by is fusion center. And then Sam, I think, can give us a better idea of fusion centers, and he's been doing more research recently. But to make a long story short, they call it fusion because they take information from all of the different things that this governor was mentioning: National Guard, Army, FBI.
But why would they feel the
together.
need to get the NSA involved in protest? Because Terry and Sam, what I've been hearing is it's all Antifa and it's Soros. And I'm not saying that Soros doesn't have his, he dips his stick in a lot of different candy pouches. He loves dipping his. But with that being said, I remember the Women's March, which was astroturfed. The cops were there, just all happy-go-lucky, having the time of their lives. They were paid to be there, actually. And there was, the Women's March is actually it's a nonprofit. It actually is an LLC. Now, with this, you have them going. I mean, the 82nd Airborne deploying.
Yes.
National Guards coming out, and now, like Sam just said, the fusion centers.
Yes.
So what that reveals to me is that somebody's not in control like they're used to being it.
Or more control than you've ever seen before. It's just in the background. And that's what a fusion center is also about. It's all based on this, what the military calls it, is counterinsurgency, COIN, that American citizens are being treated as the enemy that we learned these tactics on most recently in Afghanistan, probably today, in Iraq. Wouldn't bet that it isn't going on in Iraq today. Yeah. And we'll have a link back to another activist who caught the similarity between not just Occupy here in the States, but also in New Zealand. We'd have Susie Dawson.
Susie Dawson, yeah.
At that, yeah, and she helped us do the analysis of this because she could see it had to be right.
So Sam, you wanted one second, Terry. Sam, you wanted to add something? I feel like I cut you off earlier.
Oh, no sweat. I was just, this whole thing, looking back at how, because it's really interesting that like a month before this all started in Minneapolis, we were working on a coalition to basically get a law passed that would rein in police surveillance. It really, really simple regulations, like we wanted to basically have public hearings at City Hall anytime that they applied for a grant from Homeland Security, or there was a new trial issue of some software. Oh, what was that? I
was saying, I feel like that's a pretty simple. I feel like that should be like everywhere. If you were going to apply for a grant, we should know what the hell it's for.
Exactly. You would think so, especially because America, the federal system, you don't want federal troops doing police work, at least I thought. But the Fusion Center thing comes from 9/11 because obviously the narrative then was that there wasn't enough information flow between agencies so that they could prevent attacks. And for some reason, they decided that local police departments needed to be part of this national intelligence apparatus because Al-Qaeda was going to attack Walmart in Paducah or whatever. And so that is basically where all this junk came from. And before 9/11, we had the Pentagon and one or two other giant warehouse type of office buildings. Since 9/11, there's been like 25 or some crazy number of buildings that are comparable in size and workforce to the Pentagon built because of terrorism. And so the fusion centers are all part of that huge, that huge kind of like national security push after 9/11. And so,
well, you know what they say, never let a good crisis go to waste, because that's literally what, I mean, to be honest with you guys, I mean, like, if we saw them as active when it came to combating domestic terrorism from white supremacists, as they are with combating the one-off incident of 9/11, we will look like a damn rainbow coalition, man. Martin Luther King will be resurrected because of how much better this damn country will look. And it seems, in my opinion, that they use that crisis to fast track the surveillance state. And it had nothing to do with terrorism.
Yeah, 100%. And even that came out really early on in the Snowden archives when I think the first leak was that Verizon has all of American, business cell records. And then slowly it came out that they're looking at all kinds of people, including doing things like corporate espionage for mining contracts in Brazil and stuff. What does that have to do with American national security? And it's so much bloat. And that's the thing, like the pipeline of military surplus crap that we didn't even use in Afghanistan and Iraq. Where are we going to put it? I guess just give it to the local police for free. And so that's why I brought up this whole thing about this law we are trying to get passed, is because only a couple of months ago, it looked like a huge uphill battle. Like we were writing scripts to come up, work around the cops' narratives and all this stuff. And then George Floyd, he's murdered in the street here. It's filmed. And the police knew that he was being filmed when he did it, didn't stop him. The uprising happens. And all of a sudden people are like, we need to get rid of the police altogether. So now when we're taking these simple regulations to City Hall, we're trying to find stuff to add in because there's such a push from people to do more. And it's just such a crazy world to see change in the last few months. And I'm happy like people like you are using your show to talk about the fusion centers because, even on this type of independent journalist circle of people, it was sort of hard to kind of broach the topic and not look paranoid. But now,
which is crazy to me,
people are being pushed over in the street and bleeding from the ears just for being at a protest.
So I was in the military intelligence unit. Although I was on the legal side, I know how a lot of things work, and I also know it was kind of common sense, if you will, for even the brigade to work with the local PD in that city, right? It was like common. And so it's just bizarre to me that people would think that, they're involved in every other aspect of our lives, but they wouldn't be involved in policing us directly. That's the best way for them to do it without having to put their hands on us themselves. So it kind of removes, it's like ICE, right? So in Georgia, ICE is basically the police. It is the police departments. They're just paid to also have an ICE on their vehicles. And so now if something happens, they can blame the Georgia PD, whatever that, the Atlanta PD, Gainesville PD, whatever, instead of, it isn't ICE's fault. It's just Atlanta PD. This is what the government has always done. So I want to flash back really quick. Terry, what are some of the tactics you saw used that kind of let you know, something's fishy here? I don't know. I can't quite put my finger on it, but they're seemingly able to kind of preempt our movements in a way that we have not really seen before.
It's very startling when you do figure how much is deployed against you and you finally get it through. Again, the problem is this isn't just a small town crooked cop. You're dealing with the entire worldwide military industrial complex. Susie Dawson from New Zealand, Occupy New Zealand, picked up at the same pattern that we were noticing in Ferguson and in Baltimore was happening in Occupy. And these were the tactics used to destroy the Occupy movement. This is not a game. This is not a joke. These guys are for real. It's not a conspiracy theory, and it's documented. And we'll have some links that show some of that documentation. Hopefully, the piece of legislation that Sam's talking about right this minute did kind of get passed in Brooklyn, didn't it, Sam?
Yeah, it did in a huge way. Pretty soon we're gonna. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
It's so I think in New York we're gonna find out pretty soon all the different stuff that they had going on in the NYPD's main fusion center. As long as they don't destroy the records or something stupid, of course. But that's a huge domino to fall because that's the biggest police force in the world, as far as I know, and obviously the top maybe 3 or 5 for New York being the most surveilled city in the world even. So that's a huge step forward. And these laws have been popping up in places, mostly in the West Coast, to kind of limit use of bans or tell local police that they can't cooperate with ICE and there's no information sharing. And that kind of stuff I think is really effective because that's essentially what the fusion centers are doing. They're just basically taking all this national intelligence, boiling it down, and then since it's not coming directly from NSA to COP and it's going through this fusion center analysis process, it doesn't kind of violate the law in their mind.
You brought up a good point. You said that those methods that they were using to refuse information sharing with local PD, they're effective. And I mean, I hate to bring it back to this, but I think it's extremely important because it really doesn't get discussed enough. It just kind of reiterates something. Ladies and gentlemen, while y'all are paying attention to these presidential elections, to these national conversations that are basically being forced down your throat, a commissioner is approving of 53% of their budget to go to the LAPD. and you could have gotten them out. But you were so fixated on these people who are promising you the world that the person who actually has the control of your entire world in their hands, you're not paying attention to, and they're counting on it. So these elections, because it was what, the city council that passed that in Brooklyn, or like the whatever, I can't remember what they call it in Brooklyn. I think it's something else.
Yeah,
but basically,
the city council.
Yeah, and it's like, y'all, the transparency for the NYPD, and let's be honest, these people are not the brightest. They're going to try to get rid of some stuff, but they're not smart. They're just corrupt, and it's it's easy to look smart when you're corrupt because you're like, man, how do they keep getting away with this? Because you keep playing by the rules while they're not. Right? It's easy to win chess if you're cheating every move, and so, but Terry, so with Occupy. Or, well, one, not just with Occupy, but have you seen any other movements that you can remember on your way to this point that you saw signs of being infiltrated by this specific policy?
That's the scariest part of this, is as just like in Ferguson, while we were trying to tell people you're not just cops, this is the whole worldwide machine. Then after Ferguson, Baltimore and the whole country went up for grabs. And Sam gets his start tracking. They're using Air Force drones. There were actually Predator drones shown over some of this. It used to be illegal to use military on U.S. That's gone. That was part of Patriot changes, I think. Or maybe.
Actually, I think Obama did that, right?
Yes.
Because he militarized the hell out of police. I know that Bush did. I mean, other than the Patriot Act, he did some other stuff, but Obama really doubled down on that. I mean, the audacity for the man to act like he actually cares about, the black men who are being killed by cops, and then he militarized the police and let's see how it plays out. Like, what?
In Ferguson, there were civilians looking down the barrels of machine guns on tanks. Yeah. Now they'd play name games with you that, it's not a tank. No, it's just armored. It's on wheels instead of treads, but it's a tank. Okay. They shot a woman who's a preacher. They shot her. Now, granted, it was a tear gas round and it didn't kill her, but you're shooting preachers here. And what this all goes back to is counterinsurgency. It is based on information control.
Can I suggest something too? And I would like to know your opinions on this. I feel like when you see these cops militarized, it was almost like an incentive, right? Because I'm not sure that every single police department, because there are some good police chiefs out there and some that just don't want any involvement with the national level government because they don't want somebody controlling their every move. It's more so a pride type of thing. But I feel like it's almost like a deal that was struck, right? Hey, you work with us, allow us to surveil your people uninterrupted. In fact, invite us in, and we'll give you some nice little shiny weapons to use on them. It seemed like that was almost part of the deal. What did you say?
That's the 1033 program. And my understanding was after Ferguson, they had pulled in their horns on that. But I just saw some little podunk headline somewhere here in the States, close, where they were giving them a tank. MRAP, the mine-resistant, big, tall thing. Yeah. This is just a couple of weeks ago that I saw this article. And it came out a couple of days ago. So it's not gone. It's still underway. We just don't hear about it because information control.
Yep.
Go ahead, Sam.
Go ahead.
You're right, Niko, too, with Obama. Bush obviously ushered in a lot of this junk. Or I guess he kind of like pushed us on the path, and then Obama supercharged a lot of this junk, like drones, everything else. And you're also right, too, because he, at one point, I can't remember the speech it was. I think it might have been a convention speech, but Obama literally said we need to have a national police force as strong, if not stronger, than the military. Because they were worried that liberals would look weak on terrorism and that Sharia law and all this creeping socialism or whatever was going to take over America. So they had to look super tough.
Yeah, it's weird it's weird how they're like Sharia law, but also socialism. It's like, hold on, you literally cannot have both by definition if you understood them. And also the countries that seem to actually practice Sharia law seem to be our allies. We have no problem with that.
Yeah.
And again, that's information control. Look at this left hand while the right hand is doing its thing. It's being done on purpose. While
the right hand is smacking the hell out of you.
Yes, they are. When the 82nd Airborne does it, you have been smacked.
Yes. Oh, you know what? Here's a good example for people who may be trying to figure out like how they use subtle information control. So obviously you all know we've been in Iraq, Afghanistan, and the Middle East in general for quite some time. And yet, when you are in middle school and high school, how many Arab classes are you offered like to learn Arabic? Because you're not allowed to learn Arabic in high school. Because to learn a language, you have to you have to delve into the culture, because the idiomatic syncrasies and the way that the language works, the rhythm of the language, knowing that some words can have that stuff requires you to actually learn the culture. When you learn the culture, you sympathize with the culture. If you sympathize with the culture, you're going to be far less quick to pull that trigger just because you're ordered to, because you may hear something that you maybe, if you now you wouldn't understand. But if you learn in high school and in middle school, maybe because you had always intended on being in the military even, then oh man, they're not saying they're going to attack me. They're saying, yo, hold up, my wife and kids are in here, or something to that effect. So, and I know that they say they train, they do train, intelligence learns languages, but even then it's not long enough that they can delve into the culture. It's just effective and a pragmatic approach to the language. It isn't necessarily to learn the culture. So that's one way that they control information. Go ahead, Sam.
Here's another part of it too. That there seems to be a pattern that the activists that stick up, like I'll start with Susie Dawson, who is now exiled to Russia, Moscow.
I think she's in Russia now.
I believe she had been exiled only to Germany, which was different, a lot less. It's not as hard to get to her in Germany as it was. She had to skip all the way back over to Russia to get away from military-industrial complex.
That's more blatant. Exactly. I mean, Julian Assange, obviously.
There you go. Because when Susie took that paper, and we talked about coin back in 2014 to Warren Ferguson in Baltimore, and fill in the blank, that this is a worldwide coming down on you. Julian Assange was the only person who ran that. They ran Susie's, and again, I'll have a link to what Susie put together and the persons that have done this research, that have begun the documentation. So there's a world in here, and we've really got to get a handle on. We can't just keep over and over and over again acting all surprised. There's military assets being used. That was a predator over some of these American citizens, and a predator can use a missile.
Yep.
Where are we? That won't be the first American killed by.
I mean, that's for damn sure. So, Sam, I'm going to let you wrap up for us. So where do you see this thing headed in Minnesota? Have you seen it ramping up? Have you seen it being dialed back? And honestly, do you think there's anything that we can do about it? So what suggestions do you have?
It's tough. I mean, my whole reason of getting into journalism was kind of to warn people about the stuff that the government can do to them in secret and expose this kind of stuff. So it's a weird position to be in, where it's like I'm seeing all the stuff that I was kind of afraid would happen. And I think the good thing is that people have had enough, and they're willing to educate themselves and be educated. And I think allies, so to speak, are finding the right place to go to. I just think that, if we lose this opportunity to make the changes that we all know we need to make, there isn't going to be a second chance. There isn't going to be another moment like this. And I worry about a lot of stuff getting co-opted and infiltrated, because it keeps happening. Like with Occupy, got infiltrated. Maybe the feds were poking and creating division and all this stuff. Maybe it was just human fallibility that caused a lot of groups to fall apart. But there's a lot of stuff going on, and I think that we need to be really wise and diligent where we head. But I'm really hopeful too, because with the pandemic and everything else, it looked like it was just all bad. But at least for now, I kind of see these uprisings as a really bright spot. I mean, minus all the violence and destruction and things, but I think we could really make some positive changes here.
So I'm in the same camp, by the way. And honestly, and it's weird. I know it sounds crazy, kind of not antithetical. Excuse me. What's the word? Basically, you wouldn't assume that an uprising would be a good thing. But if you've been in the shit, if you will, for the last, decade or so, or if you're in Terry's case, the last 100 years or so, you gotta, you get tired of seeing people complicit comfortable going on with their day-to-day lives like the world isn't burning around them. It just so happened that we had the perfect culmination where all of issues happen all at once, where they converge at the right time, and now everybody's in the street for one reason or the other, right? And that's the important thing. Just don't accept this shit as reality, and don't accept it as if something that the government is doing is legitimate. It's not. None of this is legitimate. I mean, people can even make the argument, and I don't want to go too deep into that, but people could make the argument that they should not have to be quarantined unless there is a specific time and date and solution that you are offering. Don't make everyone suffer because you messed up and you didn't handle the situation correctly. Because either way, we still have to go to the grocery store. We still have to do all this stuff. But now I'm doing all this stuff with no damn money. And I can't go see my family because X, Y, and Z. Or I can't, like, even those protests, like, hey, can we figure out what's going on? Because I'm tired of feeling like I don't have control over my life. That is the same thing as a black man who is out in the streets protesting right now because they don't feel like they're in control of their lives. And then Susie, and people who have fought for people like Susie and Assange and people of Occupy, and, you know, they felt like they were not in control of their lives and their finance and their economic stat. Like, people are just tired of feeling like they're not in control. And so for people like myself, Sam, and Terry, seeing uprising is a good thing. And so I hope that offers a different perspective for you all. So thank you all so much for tuning into this interview on Mikasa Sukasa. Once again, that is Sam Richards. Sam, where can people find you at?
Right now, the best spot is just Minneapolis Sam on Twitter.
Minneapolis Sam on Twitter, people. And Terry, T.W. Baines, right? B-A-I-N-S. All right.
T.W. Bain U.S.
T.W. Bain U.S.
W. I'll have a
T.W.
link.
Yeah, we'll put the link in the thing. He said at MSN. Oh, sweet baby Jesus. Y'all, we just got Terry an iPhone 6. He didn't even say Hotmail. If he said Hotmail, I'd be like, but he said MS. I still got my MSN email. I don't use it. But that was when I got in middle school, whenever I still had net zero.
I have my CompuServe. I feel like a number.
Don't forget to check the junk folder.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Do you got AOL? You got AIM still? Do you still use AOL Instant Messenger?
No, I think I no.
It's funny because I'm pretty sure there's an app. I think there's actually an app still for AOL Instant Messenger, which is hilarious. I don't know who the hell I think they use it overseas. I think some like countries who are just now kind of getting into the fold because, you know, they're always behind us, and so that's what companies do when they fail in the United States. I know, right? The government would never think, yo, they're organizing on AIM. Nobody would think that. All right, people. Thank you all so much for tuning into that segment. And always remember, more than anything else, find your balance. Peace. If you like that segment of Mikasa Sukasa, don't forget to like the video and smash that subscribe button. Want access to members-only live streams, behind-the-scenes footage, and other premium content? Well, you can endorse us on Rockfin Premium, become a patron through Patreon, or you can sign up for the MCSC Premium membership through YouTube. All the links are in the description below. But hey, more than anything else, always remember,
Find your balance.
Find your balance.
Find your balance.
Find your balance. Find your balance.
Find your balance. Find your balance.
Always remember, more than anything else, find your balance.
peace.